Hey everybody, it's me. Welcome back to Introduction to Folklore, and I just want to discuss the final assignment. Final assignment is basically an essay. This is a first year course. You should be learning how to write essays. Presumably you probably are either taking at the same time or have taken in the past the standard first year English courses that are basically what we have for research and writing intensive courses, but think of this as another opportunity to discover what it is to write an essay, and really what it is to write a folklore essay, because there are ever so slightly different things, and one of them is, if you have the opportunity, and it's not a requirement for the assignment, but if you have the opportunity to not simply be using book sources, but to be using your own personal experience and or archival sources as well. So folklore, as you probably know by this point in the semester, is really rooted in ethnography. So going to a place and experiencing something and interviewing people is one of the ways that folklore is done. If you take the research methods course, you will learn how to do that proper and learn sort of the step-by-steps on how to go about doing that. But this is an intro course, and it is less so. So basically the essay is an examination of group X doing activity Y. I mean, you know at this point that folklore exists as items, but only in as much as they are circulated in a group, and that the group continues to do them because they continue to be important to that group. And that group is defined in part, in a sort of tautological way, defined in part by one of the things that they do is they participate in these particular activities. You could be looking at larger groups with a asterisk. You could be looking at larger groups like of a nation, of a ethnicity, of an occupation. You could be looking at groups that are more loosely defined, like friendship groups, which are very real, but not necessarily easily defined by adverting to precedent in the same kind of way. But these are all issues that you probably have actually struggled with and now accept by this point that, okay, the group are real people, not abstract categories. So, as I said, you base this either in library research or in lowercase e ethnography, talking to people, reflecting on your own experience, and so on. In all instances, you should be citing library sources and peer-reviewed articles. Hopefully, the first assignment in terms of the article review has helped you with this. A, at the very least, be able to find peer-reviewed articles if that was your first exposure to databases, and B, maybe the article that you found is something that you're actually interested in pursuing. It's like, I found this thing on karaoke singers. I sing karaoke. I'm going to talk about karaoke and my group of friends as we do it. So I now already have the article in place that I can start to base this issue in. So I have all this in the syllabus already, but basically, what is an essay? Well, you want to start off with some kind of introduction, which I can't emphasize this enough. You can write last, because this is the age of word processing. An essay is written and then it is rewritten. And it is written piecemeal. So you start with your ideas and you can sort of work outwards, as it were. But the final product, what you're aiming for, is something that sets out the question. This is the group. These are the things that they do. This is how I will be explaining how I do it, whether ethnography or research methods, or library sources and so on. And again, you'll be using library sources in both versions, but in one you'll be relying exclusively on library. And so this is the group, this is the activity, this is how I'm researching them, and this is kind of what I'm going to say. First I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to talk about this. You just impose an order. Because remember, an essay is an argument, and you are trying to lead someone through it. And you can have something that is basically, I'm going to talk about three things, this thing, this thing, and this thing. And then the reader is prepared for it. But if the reader doesn't know that that is what the plan is, you can actually start to get kind of disjointed, because it's like, I thought we were talking about this, and now we're talking about this. But remember, writing is all about leading the reader through your point. You have points to make, and you want to make sure that they are understood by guideposting, which is why things like indenting and having paragraphs is kind of an important aspect, because you want to give the reader cues that a change in thought or a change in approach is coming, and you do that by entering into a new paragraph. So, once you've done your introduction, describe the group, who they are, what they do, a brief history. And remember, I did say you could sort of talk about these large categories, but try as much as you can to talk about actual people. There are wonderful ways and wonderful old studies of these larger categories, but they're abstractions. Things like, if we go back to the early weeks in the semester, things like ethnicity, for example. We can talk about that genuinely. But if we're only talking about it in terms of these very large, vague notions about who these people are, it starts to become an abstraction. So you can talk about sort of Gaelic folklore. Cool, you can do that, but if you can talk about it located in a particular place, if you could talk about it located in an even more particular place, if you could talk about it located in a particular time, and then if you can talk about it not in terms of just this particular time and place, but the actual people who are engaged in it, that is ideal. That option might not be available to you, because that is where you do start to approach ethnographic work or archival work. That being said, it is quite wonderful to hit that point when you can hit that point, because now you're talking about actually real people who are keeping this thing going by virtue of deliberately reperforming it. And that's the sweet spot. Then you want to describe the activities, what they are doing. And by activity, of course, storytelling is an activity. Baking is an activity. It's not simply the body in motion, and why do I have to suddenly do dances or barn raisings? It's like, those are cool, but that isn't it. But, activity, item, whatever, the thing that is being enacted and performed. And you can focus on an individual. I'll be talking about X in Y, but of course you can focus on an individual when you're doing this. And this is probably going to be the bulk of the paper. This is probably what you're going to spend most of your time on, this sort of descriptions, perhaps transcription of text, and trying to get a sense of why it is done. You can look at its history, but you also want to be looking at it in its current state. And as you approach something ethnographic, how it is done in a particular moment by particular people, and then the decisions that they do, the decisions that they make, including why of all the possible things I can do am I doing this, and why am I doing this in this particular way at this particular time when I can exercise choice in a range of ways. And you should be doing all this description, using the vocabulary of the course, thinking about things as custom, thinking about things as narrative, thinking about how to describe these groups and how to describe these activities, poking towards the vocabulary, because you are budding folklorists, and the whole point about learning a disciplinary perspective is to be learning the language that discipline uses to describe these things. Folklore is also in an interesting double bind, because we also highly respect the local term for these things. So, but one of the things that you are then doing is fundamentally translating the local term for this to at least the categorization that a folklorist might use. So, for example, tale. Not everyone uses the idea of tale. Lie, for example, is a reasonably popular, not around here, but a reasonably popular way of synonym, a reasonably popular local emic term for for the tale. It's like, well, he sat around and he told lies, by which we mean, or by which the folklorists might understand as Märchen, a fictional narrative that is not meant to be understood as true. Cool. And now you're just making those initial connections. And then some kind of synthesis. What do the activities do? Why do they do them? How have they shaped the group? How does the group accept them? How does the group reject them? How does the group change them over time? And are they similar to how other groups in parallel situations do it? And this is when you're bringing in the library research, because it is very highly unlikely. In fact, I'd go to the point of almost saying it ain't happening, that the thing that your group does is entirely and totally unique to your group. It might be done in a distinct way, but it is at least of a category of things that are likely done elsewhere. Maybe not even on the level of plot, but certainly on the level of sort of function. So there might be jokes that are only understood in this community because they have references, but at the very least, you can look at the category of jokes about other communities and say, oh, okay, well, there's some kind of analog. But and that's when you learn the insights, because not simply is it like this thing is like this thing over here, but we do this thing in a way that is similar to why, not how, but why they do this thing over here. And that's when you start making these little humble suggestions of parallelism, which doesn't diminish the creativity of your group. It just puts it into that larger context, and then puts it into that larger context of the discussion of how this thing has been approached in folklore historically. And then write a conclusion. Basically sum up what you have done. And you can write your conclusion also at the end, which kind of makes sense. But just like you write your introduction last, you can basically say, all right, I now have set out everything that I said I would talk about in the introduction. Now I have this outline. Again, it's in the syllabus. And I ask these sort of series of questions. Remember, this isn't a checklist. This is not a hard and fast everything that I expect in an essay, because some of these questions might not be particularly relevant. But these are the kind of things that you're asking. What is it? How is it? Why is it? And using other people's language, the language of our discipline, the insights of other people, in order to help express it. But say, these people say this thing about this, and I am saying, informed by that, I am saying this thing about this. And that's really what an essay is. It's an attempt at understanding something, an attempt at articulating that understanding, communicating it to someone who is not present to it, but something that you find at least worthy of trying to figure out. Write well. Please write well. Try and write well. This portion of this mark is going to be about grammar and language use and so on. Visit the Writing Center. They're always open to taking your drafts and having a look-see, helping you out with the mechanics. If you're not comfortable with how you write, whether you are a native English speaker or English is your second language, just go. That helps. And for people whose language is not first language is not English, you already know more languages than I do. So, and that's probably 90% of the reason why you're coming to a university where English is the first language is to learn these skills. So, go. You will only benefit. It's always a good thing. And that's basically it. That is the assignment. You know already that I'm reasonably flexible with dates, but it is due. You need to hand it in before you're able to write the exam. What I'm going to do is I'll have basically, you can't write the exam until the essay is done, unless we get to some critical point where it's like you only have like 3 days left to write the exam, so I don't have to go in and figure something out. So, but you need to do this before the exam gets written, as best as you can. And if you are in that catch where I just, okay, fine, I'll open the exam, but I'm not going to ding you on it, but I'm going to give you one of these. Oh, you don't want one of those because I'm such a nice person. And you say, oh, I've disappointed Dr. Brody. It's a fairly simple assignment, and I think you'll enjoy it because this is where you get to show off something, especially when if you're doing it of your own group. It's like this thing, this weird little thing that we do. Look, I can use intelligent language, and I can use the language of a discipline to discuss it, and all of a sudden it's not some weird thing that we do, but clearly it's about how we see ourselves in the world. And it is joyous, and it is creative, and gosh darn it, Dr. Brody, I want you to hear about it. Awesome. Go away. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.